My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney. This is a special episode of Law Subscribed Live, and I'm thrilled to have with me Roya and Jess from Above the Line Network. For longtime listeners of Law Subscribed, Jess has already been on the podcast before, so let's start with Roya. Roya, who are you, and what is the CBF?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Matthew. My name is Roya Samarghandi. I am the Associate Director of Advocacy, Innovation, and Training with the Chicago Bar Foundation, or the CBF. The CBF is the charitable arm of the Chicago Bar Association. We are actually the largest voluntary bar foundation in the country. And our mission is really to bring together the legal community so that everyone of all incomes can afford legal services and get the help that they need. Prior to joining the CBF in my staff capacity, I was kind of tangentially related to the CBF as a participant of their legal incubator program, the Justice Entrepreneurs Project. So for about 7.5 years prior to joining the CBF, I was actually a solo practitioner aimed at serving this very underserved middle market. And like you, Matthew, I was predominantly offering kind of a subscription pricing structure, which was amazing. So I bring that kind of perspective to this project, and it's been something that I've been working in terms of direct client service for now about eight and a half years. So it's great to be here.
Well, that's very interesting. I didn't know that. And even though you're not doing it anymore, I feel like I'm going to have you back on the pod so we could talk about what that practice looked like.
I would love to. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm a true believer.
Good. You're in great company with the listeners. Jess, tell us about yourself and give us your story too. And then how what you used to do and where you're at now.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me back. I'm pretty sure I am in a different spot than I was the last time I was on the podcast. So Jess Bednarz, I'm the Director of Legal Services and the Profession at ILES, which stands for the Institute for the Advancement of the American Legal System. We are based at the University of Denver. We are a research and reform institute that innovates and moves forward solutions that make the civil justice system more just. And we are a national and independent organization. So let's see, prior to that, I worked at the Chicago Bar Foundation, which you all learned about. And that's how I know Roya. And I worked at a bunch of different roles at the CBF. Most recently, I oversaw the legal incubator program, which I have no doubt we'll talk more about here in a sec. And then also just other projects that advanced innovation in the practice of law. And I also, right out of law school, started my own law firm. So I have done that as well. It was focused on family law. So that is me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and so I'm also happy to announce, I think this is the first time I'm publicly announcing it, that I am a member of the Above the Line Network. In light of the practice that I've developed, it just sort of was a great natural fit, and I was thrilled to see it because one of my biggest problems is also, and one of the reasons I love that I have the podcast, and it was really serendipity because I didn't plan this, is like when I need to make a referral, like my clients are expecting pricing certainty, affordable prices, and that network isn't really something that exists until now. So with that, tell the live attendees and the future listeners, like, what is the Above the Line Network? And I'll let either of you take it.
I mean, I'm happy to start. I will start with our mission statement. So the ATLN, or the Above the Line Network, we are a community of leaders from across the United States and Canada and beyond, technically. And we're working together to transform the delivery of legal services to the underserved middle class. A little more specifically, I would say at the core, ATLN is a network, which we can talk more about here in a minute. It's a community. And it's also an avenue through which members can come together and educate and advocate. And we can kind of break that down more. But that's, I think, a good starting point. What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, as Jess and I kind of laid out where our respective perspectives are coming from, I think both of our organizations really recognize that there is this more than 50% of our population, this missing middle that is not getting the focus that it deserves. Justifiably, I think lower income folks get a lot of the focus in terms of funding and, the prospect of building out the legal aid community and pro bono services. But we recognize in our respective organizations, and, Matthew, I'm assuming part of the reason you've structured your practice the way you have is also recognizing the fact that the middle class cannot afford legal services when they need them because of, the way that the business or the profession has structured its pricing, and that the dearth just continues to grow. And so, to your point earlier, Matthew, we recognize the need to kind of coalesce this people that were working in silos and really bring them together and create a community and an environment where we can share best practices, what works, what doesn't work. There's so much to be learned from, what people have tried and have not unfortunately succeeded at. There's lessons to take from that. And so we really wanted to create space for people across the country, into Canada and beyond, as Jess said, to share those resources, those ideas, but also, as we'll talk about, I'm sure our strategic plan really is focused on educating on this very problem and also advocating for solutions to address it.
And talking about the strategic plan, there is a website, right? Now, I know it redirects to an ISLES website, but what's like the catchier version of the website I could share with live attendees?
It is abovethelinenetwork.org.
So posting here in the comments section, there you go.
Thank you.
So for those who are attending live, you could see that. Go ahead and check it out, because there are also some great graphics too that help explain what the line even is, which we haven't discussed yet. We've just been talking around it a little bit. So we'll go back to you, Roya, and then Jess, fill in anything else. But what is this line?
So, we struggled, I guess, with how to kind of properly define what the line is. And by virtue of the name, we are talking about the folks that are just above that line. And that line essentially is income eligibility for legal aid and free legal services. And one thing that I think we should all acknowledge in this conversation is that even the folks that are below that line that actually qualify for legal aid, those resources are so stretched already that they themselves are sometimes not able to access those services that they otherwise would qualify for. But to answer your question, what we have defined as kind of the quote unquote middle class is those earning at least 125% of the federal poverty line. In 2023, that was $18,225 for an individual in 2023, and then up to in household income, which again in 2023 for an individual was $141,568. All of that being said, though, there are a lot of different factors that come into play in terms of whether or not folks can afford legal services. That might be where they live and their cost of living, whether they have substantial student debt or other, medical debt or other financial obligations. And so it's a pretty big spectrum of folks in terms of income, but we wanted to be conscientious in defining that kind of quote unquote middle class, taking into a lot of different factors, and ISLES and the Legal Services Corporation and other folks have done great studies in terms of what this gap might look like, but that's ultimately where we landed.
Yeah, and I don't think I would add much to that. All I would say is that the reason we are focused on this particular part of the access to justice gap is because there aren't a lot of resources dedicating to serving it. There are resources, although as Roya just pointed out, not nearly enough for helping people who do qualify for free legal aid, but there really aren't many resources at all that are dedicated to serving the middle class.
Yeah, and if you're on that website, and again, that's abovethelinenetwork.org, you click on Read Our Strategic Plan, and you're going to see a really great graphic that has the umbrellas. And I think that does a really good job of explaining it. My question for you is, did you use AI to make that graphic?
Gosh, I wish. No, the real thing has made that graphic.
I mean, I don't see any glaring errors, so that's a good indication that it wasn't made by AI.
We love that graphic. Anyone that is around the CBF in particular, ISLES, I think too, but Above the Line Network, that graphic is going to be ubiquitous for everyone. And, we think it is such a great illustration of the problem and of the way that the profession has kind of addressed the respective sectors. But yeah, we love that graph. I think this is a fresh iteration for ATLN, but that's something that if you're around us and our organizations, you'll see quite frequently.
Yeah, and something I want to point out is this is the gold. Like this right here, the lawyers that are tuning in live or listening, this is not just about closing the access to justice gap. Definitely those 70 to 80% of people who have legal needs that are not being served and met by lawyers are in this group that are not in the umbrellas on this graphic. but so is everybody else who may have a legal need in the future, right? This is the latent legal market. This is a massive market opportunity. We just can't charge these people like we would normally charge if we're billing our time, clients. And so it's not just about helping, it is about helping people that have legal needs that have long gone unmet by attorneys, but it's also like a huge business opportunity for lawyers. And so let's talk about how it's okay that we can help close the access to justice gap and serve this latent legal market, and lawyers might even be able to make more money without billing their time.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this point up because it seems almost taboo to talk about it sometimes in the legal profession in a lot of spaces. I don't know about you, but when I went to law school, it was, I don't know, kind of presented like you can either make money and work at a firm or you can not make money and go legal aid. And there's no combination of the two or any other options, which just seems really bonkers because you do see those other options in other industries, and they do exist here in the legal industry as well. We are creating those through incubator programs and all of these other promising models like yours, Matthew. Yes, you absolutely can help people and make money at the same time. You can have a purpose-driven, socially conscious business. And what better business to have? I think it's the most interesting space to operate in. I don't think it's necessarily an easy space to operate in, but it's challenging and interesting and so fulfilling. And yeah, I'm just so glad you brought it up.
And I will say, that this gets into kind of the pricing piece of it, which I know you know well, Matthew, but from somebody that was similarly situated in my private practice, the costs of doing business are so much less so that your profit margins are much higher. When I gave people transparency around their pricing, predictability around their pricing, my issues around collections significantly decreased as compared to some of my colleagues that were still billing by the hour. I think Clio's report, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think their estimation is that folks are collecting just 2.1 or 2.4 of billed hours. And so, when you're willing to innovate, including around pricing, there's so many other benefits. And again, to your point, Matthew, this is such an untapped part of the market that people are not focusing on. And, whether it's through limited scope or predictable pricing or whatever else avenue you're offering to bring them in through the door, people really appreciate the option. And it's many times a question of whether they're going to do it on their own or they're going to be able to leverage, our expertise as lawyers. And I think that option usually is a good one, whether it be full scope, limited scope, or whatever else. But there's so many ways to bring these folks into the profession in a way that helps them, but also helps you as a business, a business owner or a practitioner. And I think that, as Jess said, that's part of the conversation that I think oftentimes gets left on the table.
I'm really glad you brought up the Clio Trends Report. I've tried to get somebody from Clio on the podcast to discuss it. And here's why, is when I hear that lawyers are only collecting on a couple hours billed a day, that since I'm outside the water, when you're in water and you're swimming in water all day and the billable hours all, you don't really see it. It starts to just sort of blend in. But what I hear or what I see when I read that is lawyers don't like billing time. Mm-hmm. But what Clio and these other practice management software platforms are trying to do is we're going to help you bill your time better. But lawyers clearly don't like billing time. Like they're not like the collection rates have gone up a little bit, but like there's such a better way. But these practice management systems are not, they're risk averse, as are lawyers. So they don't want to start talking about that and saying, we're going to help you do it this other way because clearly you don't like billing time. But then they might lose customers, right? And so they're risk averse. Well, I think they could gain customers if they start to take that approach. Where it's like, okay, so we're going to have all these other things that are going to help you, make money and serve a greater market. So huge opportunity. Just throwing out there, Clio, My Case, any of the other practice management platforms, Above the Line Network could be a great partner for you to help show your users that are not actually billing their time better ways to do it, right? So, which brings me to like what is Above the Line Network actually doing for the lawyers that join it?
Well, before we get into that, I would just like to say thank you so much because that has been a frustration of mine for many years. Feedback for many years. I do want to say thank you to Clio and all others because they do a nice service with the incubator program where they do provide their practice management software for free for a certain period of time. But I would also challenge them, specifically Clio, since they always say that they want to help lawyers build client-centered practices. How do you do that when you bill by the hour? I don't think a practice that bills by the hour can be client-centric. So I would just love to hear an answer to the program. I totally agree that there is an opportunity to make changes there and that they would get more customers that way. They can keep their place, just add additional features that would allow people who don't want to bill by the hour to do that.
I do think there is, and I don't want to get ahead of anything, but I think there is a potential partnership between Clio and AltFee, which they're building out kind of a flat fee or subscription-based model invoicing service. That was one of my frustrations with Clio when I was practicing, was that it just didn't really address the way I was billing my clients. And I think they are at least in communication around that, or some type of integration with AltFee. But yeah, I mean, it's the billable hour, your incentive as a lawyer is not to be efficient. And, at some point there is a real divergence between your interests and your client's interests, but that could be a topic for a whole other conversation. So Jess, I'll pass it back to you in terms of talking about the network, because I will go on a rant.
Well, for sure. And I'll just say AI is going to make that point really clear if it hasn't already. So I think we'll make the point for us. Yes. But what will members get if they join the Above the Line network? Great question. So a variety of things. I think one, you will have an opportunity to join a community of like-minded folks who are trying to do similar things, really trying to target the middle market. If it's a law firm, also trying to make a living while doing so. But we have a wide scope of stakeholders who are in the network, which we can talk more about here in a second. But I think for practitioners, really, it's a community of like-minded folks. We're hoping to bring people together so that we can discuss challenges, we can discuss what's working well, we can document what's working well, and give everyone an opportunity to more easily connect with each other, whether that be through the listserv that we have for members. We have a member directory right now that is accessible to members, and we are talking about different ways to engage members beyond that, whether that be virtual gatherings, whether they be webinars or more workshop style. We've talked about in-person gatherings around existing conferences. Who knows, maybe down the road we'll have our own conference. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. I think that would be
manifest that. Yes.
In the universe. And so sharing resources, sharing ideas, sharing best practices. Also, there's going to be an opportunity with respect to education and advocacy. If that's something people are passionate about, this will be a network through which we can do that. So that would be educating the judiciary, the bar, all the different stakeholder groups, funders about the need to dedicate resources to this specific part of the access to justice gap and advocate for those causes. So I know that's not for everyone, but there will be an avenue for that as well. What did I miss, Roya?
I would say, I think one of the things that we have recognized in the process of really standing up the Above the Line network is how many folks are really interested in serving this segment of the community, but don't quite know kind of how or how to make it profitable or whatever it might be. And so one of the other big pieces that we're hoping to accomplish with the network is to really document and share out, whether it be toolkits or whatever vehicle it might end up being, ways that people can replicate the models that are working in their respective communities. And because ultimately what we want to see with the network is growth, not just in those that are, the types of, whether it be private law firms, nonprofit law firms, whatever it might be, we want to expand the reach of those types of programs so that it's not just, incubators in major urban areas. We can reach rural areas, we can reach people throughout the country, because these folks exist in all of our communities. And the reality is, regardless of where you live, what, type of community you live in, there's still a real struggle for middle-class Americans to find quality, affordable legal services. And so the documentation and replication of working models is something that I think we really want to focus on as a network as well.
Yeah, I've been mulling over a virtual conference too, since Law Subscribe's been going on for several years now, and I have so many, an incredible back catalog of guests, current company included, and I could put together all kinds of cool panels, and there's such synergy. We're going to have a talk off call. And maybe I delete this from the podcast episode. So again, trying to incentivize these people come live. So then let's talk about like why ISLES and CBF came together to do this kind of a thing, because certainly the Justice Entrepreneurs Project is fantastic. It's a city on a hill of how all other incubator programs can be out there helping lawyers do this. I've had several alum from the program on my podcast and continue to see the good work they do at the Chicago Bar Association programming. So, there's obviously that's part of it. And Jess, I know you came, you were super involved with that too. So why then come together to do this instead of just working independently, or the CBF just invest more in the, in the Justice Entrepreneurs Project?
Yeah.
Jess, I'm going to let you answer that question because it really all circles around you.
Yeah, I'm the common denominator here. Yeah. So let's see. We've talked about all the different pieces already, so let me just kind of string them all together, which is that I previously worked at the Chicago Bar Foundation. I was there for a while. And the Chicago Bar Foundation, their mission really is to bring the Chicago legal community together to make legal services in the courts more fair and affordable and accessible. So they had always served the full spectrum, although I would say their resources had traditionally been more dedicated towards helping the low-income population, which makes sense because they're the most vulnerable. Rode to the financial crisis back in 2009, 2010. This is when I graduated from law school, by the way. Awesome times. It was then very apparent that access to justice gap really did extend through the middle class, and that there weren't a lot of resources dedicating to serving it. And so that is one of the reasons the Chicago Bar Foundation developed the Justice Entrepreneurs Project as a market-based solution to serving the underserved middle class. They did recognize that there was a market opportunity there. And so when the program launched, I started working at the CBF shortly-ish thereafter. And I wasn't directing the program at the time, but had contact with the program, eventually oversaw it. And I would say, there was a lot of interest in the program for a good reason. We would be out talking about it, all over the country in front of different groups. And as we were doing that, we would find people like Matthew and others who were operating socially conscious practices, these promising models. And it just finally, I guess, occurred to us at some point, having a lot of these conversations in front of a lot of different groups, including most recently at the time at the Equal Justice Conference, which was largely a legal aid audience. So really all audiences were interested, but there wasn't really a group bringing it all together. And so we started to talk about what would that look like. Obviously, the CBF is a national leader in a lot of ways, but they're still a local organization. They're local to Chicago. And so as we were talking about the need for it, we also recognized that it would probably benefit us to bring on a national partner at some point, and right around the same time as when I transitioned over to ISLES. And so it just kind of worked out like, hey, here is this national organization that also has done work in this area. Probably would make sense to partner with them. And obviously it's a pretty easy sell on the ISLES end. So that's kind of how our two particular organizations came together. And it's been really fun.
So, I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, we're really just getting started, right? Like I just got invited to the, the Google, whatever that's called, team or groups or something.
Groups.
Right. The Microsoft Teams version, but for Google. and I really look forward to sharing resources with everybody on there and learning from them. I mean, one of the things I love about having this podcast is, yeah, sure, I call myself the subscription attorney and I have a subscription practice. And I think I hope my guests get some benefit from coming on the show and learning from me. But I learned so much from my guests and adapt my practice accordingly. And so there's just so much opportunity that's so one-to-one. And I'm really look forward to being involved with this group so we can all learn from each other even more, let alone just the referrals back and forth, which will happen for sure. And so there's enough reason for people to think about serving this market. And that's the other thing is, let's say, okay, well, maybe I'm making really good money, but I'm also super unhappy and I'm billing my time. But I've just learned about ATLN because we love our abbreviations and our 4-letter, 5-letter, acronyms. But I just heard about ATLN and I want to participate, but I'm not serving those clients. But maybe I want to. Maybe I'm even greedy and I just see the market opportunity you know, how do I go about becoming eligible to do it? And what are my options there?
So there's a couple of options for folks to get involved. And for those that maybe want to dip their toe in, but don't know that they're ready to commit, because we do ask for commitments from our members, which I'll touch on in a minute. You can certainly sign up for email updates, and we try to keep that list kind of active and updating you on upcoming opportunities to engage with other ATLN networks and programming and things like that. We just hosted 2 webinars, which are also available on the web page for viewing. But that's for folks that maybe aren't quite sure what they would get out of it or how they want to engage with the network. So we encourage folks to sign up for email updates, and that's also available on the web page. There's kind of 3 buttons about midway down, and I think if I remember correctly, that's on the right-hand side. But if you are interested in becoming a member of the network, we ask a few kind of commitments from you. And the first is that you're committing to using innovative approaches to make legal services more affordable and accessible to our target market. And that may be all or part of your practice. Obviously, our hope is that our members kind of continue to grow out how they approach serving the underserved middle class, but we're not requiring that 80% or 100% of your services are served to this market, or that you're using specific innovative approaches, but we want you to commit to doing that in some capacity. We also ask that you commit to advancing our mission, vision, values, and strategic plan, and you can dig into those more thoroughly on our webpage as well. Just outlined our mission, and really our overarching mission is to really transform the legal profession. So we hope you are on board with that. And then we ask that you commit to collaborating with fellow ATLN members and commit to improving the profession, the practice of law, and the larger justice system. So those are what we ask of you. We hope those are minimal asks for the benefits that you get from the network. But I know Jess and I are also happy to answer any questions or talk through any concerns that folks may have in terms of how they themselves and their current practice might fit within those commitments.
Well, before you also give an answer, Jess, for the 9 people still attending live with us, you could ask your questions in the chat. So go ahead and ask questions about what it means to join the network while we have these 2 here with us. So anything else to add to that, Jess?
I don't think so. I feel like you covered it, but I will just say again that, even if you just want to dip your toe in the water, you're interested, you're not sure, do check us out. Like, we are all for bringing people into the network. We're not, we need to expand the pie here. So happy to chat with you. We have scheduled many chats with people already. Happy to have those one-on-one conversations. And I think we would also love to hear, especially if you're interested in the network, how would you like to engage? What would you ultimately like to see from this network? Because we certainly have our thoughts, but we are trying to collect additional information along the way from current members and prospective members. So would love to hear those ideas as well.
And I will say one thing that's been really fun for us, as we've kind of launched the network and been having these conversations, is to learn about efforts that we weren't aware of. I know we, individually try to stay up on things that are happening around the country and into Canada. We keep shouting out our Canadian partners. It's just been really fun to engage with them and learn more about their system. But, there are efforts around the country and elsewhere that I personally wasn't aware of. And it's nice to have the opportunity to speak with those folks and learn more about what they're doing and figuring out how we can implement that on our end. If I were still in practice, I've already learned things that I would be incorporating into my practice. And so I wish I'd been having those conversations before, but we hope that our members benefit from that type of engagement as well.
The last thing I want to talk about before we stop recording and go off live to discuss our future upcoming conference, stay tuned everybody, is about the other efforts out there that are trying to accomplish kind of similar things that Above the Line Network is trying to accomplish, and maybe even past ones that have failed, which maybe I don't even know about. So just laying it out there as far as I see it. And I try to be involved in everything. And so I'm out there and I'm in all the groups. I think if I'm not, let me know. DMs are open on LinkedIn. So we have a couple of for-profit efforts, and that is Alt Fee, which you mentioned, right? They're a for-profit company trying to help law firms use alternative fees. It's probably going to be a long time, but I hope one day their name doesn't even make any sense anymore, because it's the main thing is to not bill your time. And then you have Fidu, which, was started by Kim Bennett, who also prior to starting that had a subscription practice for like one of the longest running subscription practices for trademarks and just brand strategy and all that. And she had some coaching. So she helped attorneys through like a coaching program before Fadoo. And I think they still offer some version of that. Just it's through Fadoo now to help lawyers stop billing their time, which just lends itself to serving this market. You've got these incubator programs like Justice Entrepreneurs Project we talked about. I think the ABA has a website that is dedicated to showing all the incubator programs out there. I don't know if it's up to date. So yeah,
we're working on that list too. Because it's not up to date.
Yep. I look forward to seeing on the ISLE's website the actual list of incubators that are out there. So those, and then obviously Above the Line Network. So those are the nonprofit approaches. Although it is these incubator programs are not free, right? But the goal is not, to be a super profitable incubator program. It's to essentially the way I understand it is like you're paying for your costs of trainers, coaches, technology, all the other things. Like you're not trying to make a massive profit on this. So I'd still lump those into like the nonprofit sort of sector. And then you have bar associations that love to talk about access to justice and pass resolutions and don't do anything. Do I have? Oh, there's one more too. It's Whitney Harper was a guest on the podcast. Her and her partner do Advos Legal, but they also have Advos Pro, which I think might be like a paid like networking group for lawyers wanting to do alternative fees or just practice law better. And they have I don't remember what it's called right now, but I think it was the P3 method at the time. And they're trying to teach this P3 method to law firms that want to stop billing time, use alternative fees. And so that's another group I know that's out there that I'm part of that group as well. And then there are other paid like networking groups and such that are not necessarily focused on alternative fees. I think Lawyers on the Beach, though, they tend to be more alternative fee based. That's like a large Facebook group I know of. So not necessarily focused on this above the line network market, this latent legal market, though it just does when you stop billing your time, it lends itself well to that market. So now I think I've covered everything that I'm aware of. Did I miss anything?
I would add to the mix, I can't remember if you said it, like there are a lot of nonprofit sliding scale law firms that are in the mix. So they would fall under nonprofits, but they do charge fees. So it's kind of like a, melding of the two things you already mentioned. There's several of those out there.
Carrie Center for Justice comes to mind, who came out of the Justice Entrepreneurs Program.
Yeah. Exactly.
And Amanda Carey was part of our kind of original, I can't remember what we were calling it, steering committee or that strategic planning committee. Thank you, Jess. That really helped us put the foundation for what became the Above the Line Network. And so her insight and others that are similarly situated were really important because to Jess's point earlier, we really are wanting to cast a wide berth, for lack of a better term, in terms of the folks that are approaching serving the middle class from a variety of different ways. And, you touched on some of the legal tech folks. There's some really cool things happening in that space. And, we have a ton of legal tech founders and staff and, just legal technologists that have been joining Above the Line. And that's been really great to see because I think that's an avenue that hasn't been tapped into the way that, I think the importance that's coming down the line with AI and all the other kind of tech innovations. But yeah, I think there's so many people doing great things. Our advisory committee is just filled with people from different perspectives, judges and access to justice commissions and nonprofit law firms, private law firms. It's just been a nice building out and representation of everyone that's approaching this problem. And, it's a real problem from, different angles.
So, and then any like previous attempts to do what Above the Line Network is doing that actually had any energy behind it that I'm not aware of, guys, other than like I said, bar associations saying we want to help close the access to justice gap. I've seen such little action.
I don't think I'm aware of anything at the national level. As you said, some bar associations have tried to put together modest means task forces and other things, I think probably to various degrees of success. But yeah, some of them, we're trying to bring the ones that are successful are still doing that kind of work into the fold too. But I can't think of anything at the national level. I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, it's great that you have your arms open saying, hey, if you've tried this in the past and it's failed or it hasn't worked like you wanted it to, come join us here. And that's the other thing. Oh, and I don't think we've said this, but do lawyers have to pay to be members of the network?
We do not. No.
So you don't need to pay to be a member of the network. So if you think you qualify, if you're interested, Roya, Jess are available. Contact them. The website, again, is abovethelinenetwork.org. Anything else you want people to know about how to get involved with the network?
I don't know if we can share our email addresses, but, we are, as Jess said, we've been having a lot of conversations with folks, learning more about what they're doing in, their individual capacities or their individual communities. We want to hear from you. So however is convenient or, whatever way to engage with us is of interest to you, we welcome that. And we hope to hear from you.
Yes. And our contact information is on the abovethelinenetwork.org project page.
Yes.
All right, there you go. So before I let you go, Jess, you've already answered this question, but Roya, you have not. Something of a tradition on the podcast, and that is a hot dog a sandwich, and why?
I am the wrong person to ask this question. I'm going to share a little anecdote with you. I'm now a pescatarian, but that choice to stop eating meat followed shortly after I ate a hot dog off the side of a road right before I went skydiving. And so regardless of whether it's a sandwich or not, I think they should not be consumed.
I hope when you said up the side of the road, it was from like a cart and not like
it was
really up the side of the road. Okay.
It was, it wasn't in the gravel.
Because that would explain why it didn't sit well with you.
Was that like a lawyery, not answering the question answer?
Right. Yes. So as a former hot dog eater, and you had such a bad experience that it pushed you to not eat meat anymore, or not eat that type of meat anymore. Is a hot dog a sandwich? And yes or no, and why?
I'm going to say no, but that's just a real gut instinct answer.
So just your gut tells you it's not a sandwich.
Yes, not a sandwich. I would love the breakdown of yes and no's and your podcast guests.
Compilation episode coming soon. And Roya, you're going to also get this question because you're here. But Jess, the question I've been asking of guests who have attended more than once is a calzone a sandwich, and why?
Oh, my gut instinct is to say it is not.
Why?
Why is it not? I guess when I think of a sandwich, and I don't know if this is the definition of a sandwich, I think of 2 pieces of bread of some sort and things in the middle. And I feel like a calzone, which I love calzones, actually, when I love sandwiches. I don't feel like that's the description of a calzone. But now I want one. I want one for
Interesting. Interesting. Well, it's almost lunchtime, at least Central Time. Roya, where do you come down on that? Calzone, sandwich, not sandwich? Why?
I have the same definition in my head, Jess, that you just described, but I love a pita sandwich. And, that is more of the calzone-esque shape. And,
But is it?
I'm going to go with yes on that one.
What is a pita sandwich? It's just like
yes, it's a sandwich. This is going to have to go offline. We're going to rumble about this one.
I'm just going to tell you that we have peak viewers. We have 15 right now, all about the sandwich thing. So I hope they all go back and watch the recording. So that
this is not the part we wanted them to take away.
Well, again, you two stick around, but we're going to go off live here in a second. Thank you so much for joining me on Law Subscribed Live.
Thanks for having us, and thanks everybody that joined.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn, since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.